Motorcycle project build, pitfalls and things you probably should know. Let's get into it.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. So in the last video, the project build was completed and fired it up and took it for a little test ride and everything. All fine and dandy. However, I wanted to make this video to give you an insight into some of the pitfalls of buying a used bike and working on older bikes or used bikes. So I suppose if you watch my video about the cost of a project build, a lot of that element is already covered. So this is more about the difficulty of a used bike and working on it. So first of all, it really depends what kind of bike you're buying and the size engine. And most of you think, well, what's that got to do with it? Anything? Okay, this is my thinking. Okay, if you buy, let's say, 1000cc bike, an older bike, usually, not always, but usually they are owned and ridden by older people. So those older people usually, not always, have some idea about maintenance and tools and doing things in the right way. If you buy a very small bike, 50cc 125, as in this case, you're going to have young kids who have been working on this bike, been chopping at it, been hitting it with a hammer, just trying to make it work, and cutting wires here, left, right and centre. They're doing all the wrong things to keep that bike running. And sometimes when they fix it, they're not doing it in a proper way, or they're using parts that are just not appropriate. So that is one of the big pitfalls of buying a used bike. It really depends who the previous owner was, what their experience is, and what they've done to the bike. And you can find a bike that on the face of it seems absolutely fine, or it's got a few minor issues. Then when you start digging deep into it, you find lots and lots of problems. And that's exactly what I had with this bike, really. Lots of hidden problems with the bike that I wasn't aware of. So that's one of the big pitfalls, really, is, you know, you can buy a bike and because of the negligence or the, I don't know, lack of experience of the previous owner, you can have problems with your bike that require a lot of work. So bear that in mind. That's one of the big pitfalls that I would say. The other thing here is also the availability of parts. Now, again, this can increase the cost, as I said in the previous video, but also it could really stop you from fixing your bike for months and months and months because you just can't get the appropriate parts. And it also depends how able you are to make parts yourself to just get the bike running. So let's say, for example, when I finally got this started again, I had problems in starting it with a manual choke. So I had to make my own manual choke lever so I could access it from the side of the bike there in order to get it started. So if you're not that way inclined to be able to figure things out and just come up with an idea, then you're going to be stumped. Also, if you can't find the specific parts that you need, then you're going to be stumped as well. There's lots of pitfalls with bike building or car building, and you know, it's tools, comes down to tools, comes down to experience, comes down to if you've got the ability and the space to do it. You need to be kind of organized as well in how you take things apart and put them back together again. Don't do like I've done with my tools being all over the place. And again, you know, one of my big failings in mechanics is that I tend to start throwing tools at it and I start putting the tools down, or the sockets or the wrenches or whatever it is, and then I'm wasting so much time in trying to figure out where I've actually put my tools. So it's, you know, that's one of my failings. I've got lots of failings, but that's one of my failings there. So, you know, always being methodical about your engine or your motorcycle dismantling and, you know, rebuilding, that's going to be key. If you've never done this before, or even if you have done this before, I would always take loads of pictures, loads of drawings, make lots of templates. You know, get pieces of cardboard and draw the outline of the engine casing, let's say, to put your bolts in. Some people don't. They just, you know, take all the bolts off, stick them in a jar, and then, you know, when it comes to rebuild, they can say, okay, that bolt goes there, that bolt goes there. They can figure it out. most people tend to lose their way quite quickly because they start taking things apart, then they have a whole pile of parts, and they think, where does this go? And then that's another reason why project builds kind of stop, because people just don't know where they're at with the build. So if you've been methodical with your dismantling, then it's easier to get back on track. Now, this is a word of warning. This is a big pitfall, I would say, for most people who attack any kind of build, whether it's car or bike, is that you get quite enthusiastic about taking things apart. Yeah, I'll just remove that, quickly remove that. You put it all down, and then you think, in your mind, you think, yeah, in a day or two, I'm just going to put that back on and I will remember everything, right? So here's a problem. When you dismantle your bike, engine, frame, whatever it is, and you haven't been methodical about recording what you've done, what happens is, if you have a problem with getting a replacement part, so you might have to wait months and months and months. Well, if you've just, quickly dismantled everything and put everything in a jar, you might have totally forgotten how to put it all back together. Especially if you don't have any maintenance workshop manuals, which I would always suggest you try and get. He says, getting this bike, and it was only yesterday after I finished the project build that I finally managed to get hold of an engine maintenance manual. So thank you to LPMX for sorting that out for me. Most dealers wouldn't want to touch me with this, and the manufacturer wouldn't want to touch me with this. So there's only one who's actually come through and delivered. So that's a good thing. So you need to do a lot of research on how to build these things and, take them apart and put them back together again. There's a whole list of pitfalls, and there's a whole list of reasons why you should never do a project build. Apart from the biggest plus is the getting your hands into it and learning about it and knowing how they work. This kind of relates to the previous video when I talked about cost. You can spend a lot of money on a project build or a refurbishment or a restoration, or the other day I saw a video when somebody's calling it a resurrection, and I think that's a really good term for getting a bike back up to speed, as it were. A resurrection. It's not necessarily restoration, but you just want to resurrect it back to life, and that's pretty much exactly what I've done. You can spend all this money on this bike and you virtually spent as much as you would do on a brand new bike, especially cheap motorcycles, like 125s or 50cc's. When you'd be paying £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, let's say, you could easily get up to a couple of thousand on a rebuild. So you've got to be careful with the money, and the pitfall is that you're struggling with the parts, or you're struggling with the the tooling, and everything is just elongated, really. So that's it. I mean, and this is one of the things that I would say about project builds, the pitfalls. It's about timing, it's about being methodical, it's about the parts availability, searching for those parts, having the correct information, trying to keep your budget in check as well. Lots and lots of things. And there's also trying to figure out, say, can you fix something yourself? Can you make a part for yourself? Or are you always trying to get the specific part? Because that part, for example, may not be available. Even for a relatively new bike, you may struggle to ever get parts. Let's just say, for example, on this one, the brake calipers, which I've rebuilt and put on the bike, and they're working fine, but the shaft rubbers which would go on these calipers, they're not available. Can't get them anywhere. However, I've managed to get generic rubbers, and they are not the right fit. They are just too thick, big and bulky. I've tried to trim them, tried to do anything. So you kind of have to come up with another way to make those calipers work. Same with the brake pad retainer spring. If you watch a previous video, I had to make one of my own. I'm still waiting on one to arrive. So these things that you kind of have to get over, there are hurdles that you have to get over. And sometimes they're just not possible, and other times they are, and it kind of really depends on your experience or what you're prepared to do as well. So again, I mean, there's a whole list of pitfalls, and I'm sure there are some that so let us know in the comments what you think about this as well. Any project build is a great learning experience, and that experience you're kind of paying for with the cost of the build. So you know at the end of it, you say, well, I've built that bike, I've stripped it down, I've put it back together again. I know everything about that bike. So there are very few people in this world who can actually say that about their machine, that they've stripped it apart, put it all back together again, and they know every nut and bolt on that bike. So in that case, the £2,000 that you've spent is kind of money well spent. Not in terms of the finished product, but the learning experience that you've got. So, you know, always look at that from a project build as well. But as I say, it's a parts issue, it's a tooling issue, an experience issue, capability issue, and how organized you are. That's going to be the key to try and avoid some of these pitfalls as well. And you might be able to get the really cheap bike or a free bike somewhere, and people might say, don't knock a gift horse in the mouth. The problem is that even though it's cheap and even though it's free, you might have so many problems with that it's basically just going to the junker anyway. You know, you're not going to be able to do anything with it. So always think about that. Anyway, a couple of other jobs to do. That'll be the next video. But I'll leave you with that. I hope you found that useful. Pitfalls on project builds, loads of them. Just go in with your eyes wide open. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, like and share. Check out the website RevelatorAlf.com. Ta-da.